And that's just in cycling. So it's like almost like if you're playing tennis or you're playing another sport, is like what's out there that is kind of missing. So when we talk about product, we always look at what is the underserved needs, what's out there, but it's not kind of ticking all the boxes, and see if you can plug into that and kind of create an opportunity.
Yeah, so I think, to the point of the different races and this space being quite fragmented, there is probably an opportunity for someone to apply a completely different business model and consolidate all of this info into one place, right? Because the reason, because it's fragmented, is most likely has to do with a business model or a structuring of deals of some sort. So this is not a tech problem. This is a business problem.
Welcome to How Would You Build It? It's Bobby and Rainier. We're back again for another episode where we try and help people understand, the trends that could lead to building an awesome new startup or new tech business. Rainier, welcome. How are you doing?
Yeah, great, Bobby. Excited to get going.
Yeah, absolutely. This week we're talking a bit of sports tech, and just offline I was telling you how you don't really hear much about the sports tech kind of industry. Everyone's always talking fintech or AI or Web3, whatever it is. It's actually quite interesting that we're going to be talking a bit about sports tech, because from a bit of conversations we've been having, there's actually a lot of opportunities out there. And I thought maybe what we could start off with is actually identifying kind of what the space looks like at the moment. So Rene, on your side, how do you see the kind of sports tech kind of arena?
Okay, so we're not even 5 minutes in, and I'm going to drop a buzzword. So the fourth industrial revolution brought about this amazing capability to, and a fourth industrial revolution encompasses a lot of different tech, right? But two things specifically. So firstly, the IoT devices, tracking devices that are connected to the internet and can feed back data. And on the other side, this capability of supercomputers to process a high amount of complex data and give us really cool insights from it. And, it kind of just sport tech almost took off when a lot of people realized, wait a minute, I can track stuff and all kinds of things using IoT devices on the one side. And if I can present it in an interesting way on the other side, I can just take the level of entertainment that comes with sport and the level of enjoyment of participating in sport to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
And I think that has introduced or brought about a whole new wave of new startups that are doing all kinds of interesting things. And it's not that new, by the way. A lot of these companies have started years ago, but now the technology has caught up to a point where it's become really interesting.
Exactly.
And we see some really exciting stuff in the space.
Yeah, exactly. There's actually some, I was just thinking as you're talking, I'm not wearing it right now, but your smartwatch, I mean, that kind of technology is also like been more affordable. And now you can track running, cycling, all sorts of things that you do, weightlifting, all kinds of, performance things that you're doing can be tracked, can be integrated with some sort of an app. I mentioned Strava offline as well. I think that's like, we're one place where everybody's smart devices are coming in and giving the data to kind of show you your performance. I mean, I love Strava. I use it quite often, and you can see how you are getting fitter by the week, by the month. And then it kind of talks about things that we were talking about, the gamification of it, which brings that enjoyment. So now you're actually looking at your performance, gamifying it and comparing it with other people. Without it being a game, you can do it already. But that's just one example of where we are kind of creating this new way of sports tech that we can track how we're doing and kind of play against other people.
Yeah, and I think that's quite an important part when, bringing in community and competitiveness and, doing this with other people and the visibility and being able to share. But on the other side, actually tracking your own progress and seeing your own things. So there's some interesting application there. Also some really cool development in the professional space, like what stuff people are building. One example is a South African company actually that, mostly operates abroad. And if you've ever watched golf, you've probably seen one of the or seen their technology in action. It's a company called Flightscope. And Flightscope is originally was based in Technopark in Stellenbosch. They now have offices in, I believe, Poland and obviously in Florida, where the world capital of golf is at. And the technology really is a Doppler radar coupled with a image recognition software that actually tracks ball flight when someone hits it. So on the PGA, sometimes you'll see someone hit a golf ball and it will actually show the trajectory of the ball. Now, that's technology that was developed in South Africa. Well, most of them. There's another competitor that also...
I didn't realize that.
also works on the PGA, but sometimes they use the Flightscope technology, and that's quite interesting. Now, it's nice to watch it on TV, but also for the pros, they can actually buy one of these boxes, and they're quite cost effective. They can actually see exactly the way they hit the ball, where on the club they hit the ball, and it really helps them improve their game and understand exactly where they're going where they're making mistakes and how they can improve that. And it's this amazing combination of a Doppler radar and then, advanced image processing, together with processing all of this data to actually translate it into saying, well, what does it actually mean if the radar says the ball's trajectory for the first 10 meters was in this direction, moving at that specific speed? So there's a lot of stuff in the back. So it's not only the hardware, it's actually the integration of this entire system that makes something like this a really complex and well-built engineering project.
How far are they in their journey, just out of interest sake? Like how long have they been around and been doing this?
So they've been around for a very long time. So they actually, I believe, Mark Shuttleworth made an investment in them years ago when he still had the Yearby Dragons Fund, which eventually turned into the Knife Capital Fund.
Okay.
Or the first Knife one. And I believe there was a management buyout from the Flightscope team. So a few years ago, so Knife is no longer involved there. But they've been going for years, and they've also branched out into baseball. So you can imagine the same kind of technology, radar technology, as you pitch a ball, the flight of that ball, and is it curving left or right, the speed, all of that stuff. Tracking that is quite interesting for professionals when they train. So they've introduced it in baseball as well. There's some applications in tennis. I believe they're doing some interesting things in athletics as well. So a lot of different applications in doing two things. One, on the one side, helping professionals be better, or people that are serious about a specific sport. And on the other hand, actually, the enjoyment on a screen experience, being able to provide deeper insight. I mean, I remember when they started showing the ball flight on the watching golf, it just made the whole experience much better. You can actually, if someone that tries to play golf every now and again myself, I enjoy seeing the trajectory of their balls, or sometimes also not as straight as you perceive them to be, being professional.
They make it look so easy.
But they sometimes also have run into trouble, and you can now see that easier when you actually see the flight of the ball. So amazing technology, and amazing to think that it's come out of South Africa.
That is quite incredible. And I think the first time I started seeing anything like that, and you mentioned it earlier as well offline, was the Hawkeye. I remember I'm a avid cricketer. And I used to play a lot and, still watch whatever. But the Hawkeye, when that was introduced, that was like game changing. Now we could actually understand if it was going to be an LBW, is that going to come hit the stumps, whatever it is like that. And now that's actually changed the way the game is. Now we actually have the way you can appeal and all of that kind of things. And it's all brought in by the way technology has come into the sport.
Cricket and even tennis as well. I mean, the appeals in tennis was also using that technology.
Exactly.
And then obviously the latest one in the World Cup, which is quite interesting, is ball tracking by actually placing a sensor in a soccer ball, which was quite controversial in the Japan game, if you recall. So I don't know if the tracker failed or if that was actually 100% accurate. Who knows? But
let's not go there.
If you ask any Japanese person, it was 100% accurate. And the Germans would disagree. But anyhow, it's quite interesting to see these kind of things happening, because I believe it has a lot to add to sport, and it's quite exciting to see them getting rolled up.
So I think that the question we have to look at, Jen, there's so many examples of people kind of going into the space. We've spoken with Strove, we've spoken about these Hawkeyes and the golf radars, which is fantastic. I was showing you also the Cape Epic app. I mean, my brother-in-law is partaking for the third time. Last year he took part. That was the first time I got introduced to the Cape Epic app. And I've seen already such a great advancement from last year to this year, how you're able to track them. You can actually see their positioning live, how they're performing, how they've dropped a place, come down a place, whatever it is, live, real time, see how they're doing. So what I'm kind of leading to is, there's these applications that are happening day to day. Where can someone that's wanting to get into the space, where would they see the opportunity? Because there is a lot of competition. There's a lot of opportunity. And I think for someone that plays five-a-side football every Sunday, I'd love to. I mean, the best thing I can track is how many kilometers I ran. That's about it. But like, how many goals did I score? How many assists? How many good passes? Like, there's a lot of opportunity there as well. if someone wanted to get into the space, like what should they be looking out for, when you've got the Stravas of the world that are kind of really dominating the space, or the PlayLogics, whatever it is?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing that one needs to establish is it's always easier to build a business from your own understanding and experience, right? So I've mentioned Flightscope, but there's another example of, coincidentally, another company out of Technopark Stellenbosch also using radars, but specifically for golf ball tracking in driving ranges, right? So they are, just a bit of context, they're changing, it's called Inrange, they're changing the game of how driving ranges operate to be more like bowling alleys, right? So, bowling alley is very much a social event. There's some mini games, there's some exciting things on the screen happening. So they're doing that with a golf driving range, where there's some mini games that you play, and, wherever your ball lands, it gives you a certain amount of points, and you've got targets to hit at, etc. So which actually increases the amount of balls people hit at a driving range, which means they can make more money, which means it justifies the existence for the system, right? But what I loved about what they did is actually two things. One, it was apparently started by two engineers that were part of the SKA project, working on the radar side.
Okay.
And the one guy said, I bet you I can track a golf ball. And the other guy said, I bet you can't. Like, hold my beer, let me try that. Right? And they literally built like a little prototype. But and the point I'm trying to make is they were busy building radars anyway. And they said, well, I bet you can use this in a bit of a different way, right? And as a part-time project, they use the knowledge, the skills, and the know-how and what they've learned to say, well, let's try and build something else, right? Once they had that concept proof, they said, okay, well, what do you do with this? Now, there could have been multiple different ways or avenues to pursue this, but what I loved is they really zoned in on this driving range business and said, okay, let's make a product specifically for driving ranges, as opposed to Flightscope that really helps. Also is installed at driving ranges, but it predominantly helps individuals become better at golf, and it's featured on the PGA. It tracks the balls in flight, where Inrange is just saying, let's go after the driving ranges globally, let's focus on that and make it work, right? So that was the first thing, like, what do you have in your hand? The second thing is, like, how do you turn that which is in your hand into a very focused niche area where there is an opportunity? Now, why there was an opportunity in driving ranges is with urbanization, with people having less time to play golf. You don't have 5 hours to spend on a golf course anymore, but you live in a big city, you want to go hit a few balls with mates, you've got an hour or two, now go to your local driving range. So there's a big change in behavior for golfers. So that's the first thing they identified. So I think, it's what is in your hand. The second thing is identify a niche. The third thing is, like, identify a trend. Like, there's a change in how people want to do things. And then fourthly, conceptualize a product around that. Like, okay, how do you make a product? I think the fifth thing, which is really important, is how do you actually finance this thing? Now, radars are super expensive, and these guys spent a lot of money. But what they did initially is said, let's try and once-off sell this thing to a customer. Let's get someone to buy a system like this, which not only gave them a bit of cash to develop it, they also then could actually implement it and learn and track data and get the kind of insights that would help them then eventually develop a SaaS model, right? So at the moment, they mostly sell on a SaaS model globally. They've got clients in Europe. I think there's 3 ranges in Joburg, there's 1 here in Stellenbosch, but they've got 22 clients. So they've got like 19 clients overseas, a few in the US, a few in Europe. So they're growing very nicely, but the model is really, paperball kind of SaaS structure, together with every ball they hit, there's a fee on. And these guys hit a lot of balls. Like, I played with them at one of their ranges on Friday, and they said the one next to the O2 Arena in UK has their technology in, and on busy days they hit 70,000 balls at that range.
Wow.
So it all stacks up, and if you can contribute to people hitting more balls because there's interaction and games and it's a fun element, you can imagine that this model works nicely. So if there's alignment between product and what the company is trying to do,
I love that.
So that is on the hardware side, and I think what's crucial is typically if you can find someone to buy a first version that gives you the learnings, the know-how, the data, and then you can move on to SaaS later. And I think that's where a lot of companies are struggling. They understand that long-term a SaaS model makes a lot more sense, and they want to roll out with a SaaS model from day one, but the economics just doesn't work. And we spoke about this last week, in the OfferZen example as well. OfferZen said, well, SaaS long-term could make sense, but for now we need to get the cash in.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's do placements, get the cash, and use the cash to grow and scale the business.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very similar example. So find the first customer, roll out the tech, sharpen your teeth, and then adjust the model accordingly, and roll it out from there.
Yeah, I think what's like really stamping in my head, as you've explained this kind of business model, it's quite interesting. Because, by the way, there's a restaurant down the road that's using a very similar kind of idea, but with darts. So you can hire a dart lane and you can play darts. I don't know how it works, but it looks like there's these cameras that are focusing on the dartboard and very accurately can tell you where it's hit. And so you can do the sums, you can do the math for what your score is. And there's different kinds of games. It's awesome. Interactive now. Now all of a sudden you can play battleships, you can play, I don't know, all these kind of different games on it, but the same thing. Now, there's another example of this technology that's been built. I can't tell you where it's been built, unfortunately, but I think why I'm thinking about it is because you can actually spark off other startups on this. What I mean is the restaurant is benefiting. You actually you're drawing customers to your restaurant. You're drawing customers into your driving range because now you're gamifying it. Think about what you call them, stag parties, like, hey guys, let's go play like interactive darts or interactive golf for the day. Folks are going to love that. So, you're actually on using the technology, you can actually build a business on top of that, by how you package and use this technology to build a secondary, like in the secondary market, how you can start a new business, which I think is really cool to, further than just the tech, but what businesses can be built on top of it.
Yeah, and I think what's really important, like the key with all of these businesses that work, like in your darts example, as well as in the golfing Inrange one, is what it actually does for the customer, in this case being either the restaurant or the range, is it actually does two core things. One, it increases the time people spend there, right, and the desirability for people to be there. And two, it creates the opportunity to unsell and upsell other things. Right. And I think that's the exciting part, right? So now instead of going to a driving range, hitting 10, a bucket of 50 balls and going home, now you go, let me take a few mates because we're going to play this game.
Yeah.
But while we're at it, why don't we bring the wife and kids along and they can have like burgers and milkshakes while we do it, and we'll have a beer or something. So now all of a sudden the average revenue per customer just shoots through the roof. Like you go, you make substantially more money. Never mind through them eating more balls. It actually changes the experience, and I think that's the thinking, and which is actually core to any business concept, right? Are you adding value to your customers? Well, you need to understand what your customers are trying to do. Well, if you're in the hospitality industry, you want to serve more plates, increase consumption, increase the amount of time that people spend there, and increase their desirability to bring someone else along. Like you can't play darts alone, right? Well, it's not that fun. So you take a mate with, right? So now you have two people consuming on premises, and all of and spending more time. So all of a sudden it makes more money. So I think with any of these things, even if we were to pivot the conversation a bit away from these entertainment kind of sport concepts, the principle actually remains the same. As like, what is this doing? For the end user. And what kind of trends are shifting that allows us to do that? In the Strava example, I would say there's a big part of actually keeping history, a track record of everything that you've done and accomplished, and then together with that, compare it with mates. And challenge yourself to beat them. So it's those two things that's adding value to me as a user. So that's why I want to keep all of it in one place, but I want to be able to compare it with you, Bobby. Okay, well, the only option I have is Strava because that's where everybody's at now.
Yeah, I think what's really important about what we're actually discussing is when people start a business, whether it's they start a tech product or a tech business, one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, what is the market size? Right?
Yeah.
And you're looking at this and you're saying, what is the market size of us going into a sports type tech business, whatever it is? It could be on the entertainment side, it could be on this side. The point is, you're actually building for a market that is there. And when we talk about sports, no one is more addicted to their own performance. They can see they're doing better. It drives them to do it more, to keep up that performance and then compete against other people. So whether you're doing it for professional reasons or just kind of amateur professional, so like, doing the cycle tour, now I can compare how I did last year to this year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're looking at the actual performances, but now you're looking at growing the market because now you're bringing in that entertainment level. So looking at those lanes, like golf lanes, the dart lanes, the bowling alleys, Like you're actually looking at the secondary market that's waiting for you because you're making it more fun, more interactive for people to take part. And now you've just doubled your market size. And do investors want to hear about that? Hell yes.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, right? Because the same concept approached with a different angle could have a completely different market size, right? So in the sticking with the golfing driving range example, one could say, well, there are a few thousand driving ranges in the world. Okay, so you go, wow, you don't have a big market. That isn't a big market; it's a few thousand. But if you have it, if you view it from a different angle and say, well, how many balls are getting hit daily out of driving ranges globally? Well, that's enormous amount. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is quite interesting because doing sales is not going to be that hard because we only need to reach 1,000. But let's make the business model attached to how many balls are getting it.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So now all of a sudden the market becomes enormous because you go, well, there's so many of these. And then if you can amplify it and go, well, if people use our product, that market will be even bigger. And there'll be more people, they'll hit even more balls. Then all of a sudden, it changes a lot. So it's really just pivoting or finding the right angle of saying, well, if there's a different approach to this, we can actually have a bigger market.
So I think the question is here, like if we were to kind of say, listen, I'm enjoying understanding and getting into the sports tech industry, what kind of direction could you take? Do you want to go and, approach these guys that are great at building this great tech, or do you want to use the tech that they've got for something else, or do you want to start your own one, right? Like, what do you think is the best opportunity now in kind of embracing this, what we've just been talking about?
Yeah, I think firstly, if you're into hardware or you have mates that are into hardware that can build some of these cool things, I think there's a lot of different avenues to explore. I think the darts one is a great example, and there might be a few other ones, pool tables or something like that. I don't know what that game could be, but I'm sure someone can figure it out. But there's a lot of these things that one can look into if you have that expertise. If you're more on the software side, you mentioned the Cape Epic app. In my experience, it's really hard to monetize those kind of apps other than getting the sponsor to pay for it. And typically that's not a great business model because, from 1 year, their ROI isn't that great in my experience. It's a really challenging thing for them to justify on their spend. So, but what could be interesting is using that as a stepping stone for a platform that could do more things, be it a different kind of tracking different kind of races, be it evolving that into a Strava competitor with a very specific niche, building out a community from there. So there's those kind of options. So when everyone builds one like that, I would say if there's a longer term vision to actually evolve this into something else that has a niche, there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
And it's almost saying, once again, it's saying, well, let's build the skills and the know-how and the learnings, building this app using finances that has a very specific outcome in mind, example being able to track the riders on that race, and using those learnings and saying, okay, well, how do we then, our next step, how do we make that a product?
Yeah.
Because then you don't run the massive cash flow risk of saying, okay, cool, we're going to spend upwards of $1 million to actually build this thing and hope it works. You're actually going to do that from a place where even if you were to spend $1 million, well, you've done one of these apps before and you've seen what works and what doesn't work. You've seen why people interact with it and why they don't, and you can use that learnings and actually take a step up and
Yeah. I've actually got an example that speaks exactly to what you just mentioned. There's a startup from South Africa called Strove. I don't know if you've heard of it, Rene.
Yes.
So Strove are integrating with, well, I think their initial integration was with Strava. I think they've expanded their integrations now to other Garmin or whatever it is. But the point, what they're doing is you're taking the data from Strava and they've created a B2B model. So you provide this to a company and say, if you get all your employees to plug it into Strove, then you can see that they're interacting, their fitness, they're kind of looking at the well-being of their employees, especially. And I think what really blew up was during the pandemic when everyone was back at home. They said, well, let's get them away from their computers. Let's get them away from sitting at their desks all day. And they now can go and go for a run, go for a cycle, go for a walk, do whatever it is. And we'll reward you for that. So now they're plugging in a reward system for going to get Kauai, whatever it is. So what they're doing is they're actually allowing, they're kind of promoting well-being for the employees of different companies. And they've now pivoting also to wellness. So now, meditating and all those kind of things as well, to be able to reward their employees to live a healthier life while working for the company. And what they were able to do is now on a Monday, when I saw my mates, my work colleagues, I could compare our performances over the weekend. Like, oh, did you do a 40K cycle? Oh, I did 35, and now I'm leading you, and now I'm going to go do, I can't let you win this week, because they had leaderboards, and they gamified the workplace by being more healthy, and kind of so using those integrations to get the employees to kind of compete against each other and live a healthier life, and then get rewarded for it. And so you could, as a company, benefit from this app that they've used. So that's Strove.
I love the concept, right? Because if you think about it, they're literally aligning different kind of objectives of both the organization, individual, and a third-party company that's providing a benefit or a reward to one solution, right? So we're going, company wants the employees to be more fit and active, because research shows that those employees, have less health risks and, all the other benefits that come with that.
Better state of mind.
It's easier for them to focus at work, better state of mind, all of those things, right? So the company is saying, I want my employees to be to work optimally, right? And one of the things we can do is incentivize that. So there's a value associated to that. On the employee side, they're going, cool, I can get free stuff, and I can compete with my work colleagues, which is kind of like the social element that goes with working with someone. And then on the back, they're going to brands and going, hey, do you want to reach new audiences? Why don't you give us a discount on something which they can then redeem and come into your store, which creates footfall for a lot of these guys. So someone gives a free Coke or with any purchase of whatever, maybe not a Coke, it's all about healthy, a free still water. But then you spend a lot of money on buying overpriced hummus wraps, and then you get a new customer. So it's bringing about alignment, and that's often what business is about, right? How do you bring alignment between different parties trying to achieve different things? And then there's a exponential value that gets unlocked. It's not only singular value to a single company doing a single thing. It's actually saying that it's doing one thing to the company who buys it, it's doing another thing to the employees, but it's doing a third thing for these partners that want to get involved. And then each of them have to contribute a bit of value, either through time or product or money. But for each of them, it's actually a manageable cost in the context, because that value combined actually creates this ecosystem that is valuable for everybody involved. Really hard to pull off, by the way. It's not simple. So I have a lot of respect for people that get it right. Because how do you value someone's, you have to assign a value to someone doing an exercise, right? So, how do you quantify that? I don't think it's the same for every person. Yeah. So you have to kind of find a value for that and keep this whole ecosystem in balance, because you technically creating a little economy, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying, you exercising will contribute X amount of value to your company, and some of that value, together with what an external partner is offering, is getting paid back to you in exchange for that. So it's almost as if you need someone that understands monetary policy and economics to make sure you keep all of that in balance. Which, by the way, I'd love to see more people in economics actually reach over into the tech sector and work in startups and help them figure these complex things out. Because often it drops on the plate of a product manager, and it can be a bit overwhelming because it can get quite technical.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're talking to unit economics. Like, how does the effect on one person, evolve into a product, and like their interactions and their monetary things. I mean, in the Web3 space, we talk about tokenomics, right? So you get this token, what do you do with it? Like, is there more of it? And what value is it giving to me? But you're right. So you're absolutely right. It's like building these little mini economy. Yeah, I think that's super key. I think that's what all these apps are actually doing, is you're building a little mini economy, whether it's in the golf, whether it's in the darts, whatever it is. Strove, you're building a mini economy within these companies, B2B, and I think there's an opportunity there. So you need to look at scale. I think the one point you've kind of touched on is ROI. Is how do you build on that ROI to make it sustainable, to keep building on top of it? Because your backlog is kind of always looking for a new opportunity to grow the product. So how does one kind of look for the next opportunity? that talks to ROI, right? There's the 80-20 rule, like what 20% can you build to bring 80% of the value to your product?
Yeah, and look, I think it's just having a mindset of saying, how do we consistently focus on revenue generation, right? Anybody that's built any kind of product would know how easy one falls in a trap of going, well, let's just continue to build things, right? Let's just build this thing and that thing and this thing. Whereas if the focus is saying, let's build around value creation that would lead to revenue generation, then I think we're always on the right track. So I've seen even the best product people, they have great product ideas, but they neglect thinking about this idea of value creation in order to drive revenue generation. And if you keep that front in mind and center, you might not build the flashy things. In fact, you might do a lot of boring things, but the reality is you're going to be generating cash. And if you're generating cash, that money, maybe it's not enough to cover the bills or get you to break even, but any extra money you can get early on can go towards marketing. And the faster you can grow and get more customers, the more revenue you get, obviously, and the more that circle starts spinning, right? So I think a lot of the times people neglect that for a few reasons. One of the reasons being it's a bit uncomfortable to make revenue while we're having fun building cool product. Like, why would we actually derail ourselves and try and make money? But anybody that's built anything that has made money would tell you, like, focusing on generation of revenue early on is quite key to making it grow. Now, there are, once again, as with anything, there are no two startups that are the same, right? So sometimes it makes sense to spend a bit of time building, but I think the concept remains the same. Whatever is getting built needs to be in order to drive value, in order to make revenue.
I think the question that's kind of playing on my mind at the moment is, what would my strategy be, and would I go towards a company that's already in place? I want to start from now. It sounds like the startup costs, when you talk about these radar trackers and stuff like that, it sounds like quite a lot of upfront capital that you have to put down. So rather leveraging what's out there or going to the company and asking, how can I utilize your technology that you already have, that I can then start my subsequent kind of to plugging into what they've got. I feel like that would be the best route to take. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so if you're not into hardware and more into a software play, I'll start and having a look at, what's an HealthKit, like Apple's HealthKit, and I believe Android has an equivalent. I'm an Apple user. I haven't touched an Android phone in a very long time. But I believe Google has an equivalent of HealthKit, which is basically a centralized place where it stores health data. Now, if you have your smartphone close to you, why don't you open up and check all the amazing things that you can actually store in there? It's quite comprehensive, and I was quite blown away the other day when I went through it again and see, well, there's all kind of interesting things, and some of the stuff I had to Google or read more info on, because I'm like, I don't even know this is a thing. So it actually does quite a large amount of data gets stored in there. So one can start on to say, okay, what's in here that I can actually draw from in order to do something else with, right? Now, that could typically result in a bit of data processing. It could result in some community drive of connecting different people around a specific exercise or a specific theme. But I think that's a good place to start. I think other than that, looking for an opportunity to finance or partially finance your first build, whether it's software or hardware, is always a good idea, right? So, if you were going to build a app that tracks cyclists to some level of detail, whether it being, paddle speed, torque on the wheels, or whatever, something quite unique that's not out there, which you believe will, really address a specific part of the market, and you don't, even if you have the capital to build it, why don't you partner with an event and get a sponsor to sponsor it and make something cool out of it, and build a first version that way, learn your lessons, and then go from there. So I think there's some of those opportunities, and other than that, it's really about what's in your hand and how can you hustle to get to the right people to get an opportunity or something.
I like that.
Which is always the difficult part.
Yeah, because then it becomes the people. But I really like that idea, because I was just thinking, like, if I think of your cyclist thing, I'm also a cyclist, and I see there's about 3 different apps. There's 3 different places where I can get my information. Why can't I just bring them all together? Like, why can't you just give me a product where these 3 things are sitting in one place that I can get what I'm looking for? So it's kind of maybe looking at partnering with these other companies, figuring out how to get information, like get access to their APIs, Do you have an open API? Can I get that data from you? Because, you know, maybe you can come in, we'll give you a bit of equity, give us that data. We've got a cool idea that we can now start incorporating and bringing in with all these different things, make it one central place that we have all the things that we're looking for. Because by the way, Rene, I have not found a single app that can track all the races in South Africa. So whether you're doing the Cape Epic, the Argus, the PPA 1 tonner, whatever the race is, they're all sitting in different places and not one. So how am I performing? How did I do last year to this year? How am I training
Which
for
app
that?
was that on again?
Yeah, no, it's true. That's exactly it. So it's like, you know, and that's just in cycling. So it's like almost like if you're playing tennis or you're playing another sport, is like what's out there that is kind of missing. So when we talk about product, we always look at what is the underserved needs being, what is underserved for the users, what's out there, but it's not kind of ticking all the boxes, and see if you can plug into that and kind of create an opportunity.
Yeah, so I think, you know, to the point of the different races and this space being quite fragmented, you know, there is probably an opportunity for someone to apply a completely different business model and consolidate all of this info into one place, right? Because the reason, because it's fragmented, is most likely has to do with a business model or a structuring of deals of some sort. So this is not a tech problem. This is a business problem. So whoever has the tech and dives in and figures out a proper way to do the business side of this can actually consolidate all of this, and then that business could very well be economically viable as compared to the single ones just doing one race a year, which in my mind could be really hard to keep maintaining and keep going. So there's a bit of business model innovation, and, you know, pure old hustle necessary to do that. But yeah, actually, while you were talking, it sparked an idea of another way to do this. So there was a company called Ikubu, IKUBO, actually also from Technopark Stellenbosch, and they did some radar consulting for Reutech and some companies overseas, and they looked at they were all cyclists, and they look at this problem going, you know, when we're biking on the road, you know, there's so many accidents and cars not seeing bicycles, and, you know, that's where the whole movement started with the yellow stickers of Think Bike. And that was a bit before the mountain bike days were that big, right? So, and they looked at it and said, well, can we build a small enough radar that you can put at the back of your bike that actually picks up if a car is heading in your direction, and then have like a red light indicator at the front of your bike saying there's danger, so you can move more to the side. So it does two things, actually. As if the car gets too close to the bicycle, the light at the back flashes more heavily so that the car could see it, but on the other side, it actually shows the cyclist. Now, they built this little prototype, and they spent some money getting it out, and they had a launch event, and then they had it on like a crowdfunding thing where they got one cyclist reviewer in the US quite excited about the product because it was quite innovative, right? But it really started from, in South Africa, it's really common that people get knocked over bikes, off their bikes on the roads by taxis, right?
Yeah.
And all of after it created got Garmin excited, and to this day it's probably one of the biggest exits that a South African tech startup has seen, when Garmin bought Ikubu a few years ago.
Interesting.
And that has now evolved into a Garmin product which sells on a global scale and apparently does really well. But it started with them going, you know, we're a consultancy, we do radar work. Let's look at, you know, what problems we're facing, and one of the problems was like, we'd love to be more safe on our bicycles. So, you know, that's really a space to start. Is like, what is in your world, and how can you pull that back and say, okay, let me build something that is peripheral to what I'm doing already, and then build it out from there.
You know what I love about what you just said? It's like, it's not about the tech, it's actually about the business model. So to actually look what's out there and then just improve a business case, putting better people behind the business wheel, and then let the tech come afterwards. I really love that, because you're kind of looking at what is the opportunity space, looking what's out there already, and then actually finding the people to kind of just change the way the current status quo is of the industry. So
absolutely, you know, business model innovation.
Exactly. So it's not about the tech, it's actually about the business model, and being the person in the middle that brings the right people around the table to have the conversation that can turn something that's already out there into a successful business. I love that. I feel like we could double down on that, but kind of run out of time. Very interesting conversation today, Rene. So how would you build it?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Bobby. See you next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week, and we'll figure out the next cool topic and trend that to look out for people looking to start a business. And we'll see you then.